Hey, good evening, folks. Todd Williams here with Taproot, along with my cohort, Mr. Marshall Wilson.
Hi, y'all.
And we're glad that you guys have tuned in this evening here with us in Taproot. Always glad to have people. And I know that I've been talking about having a way for us to get feedback from you. And talking with some of the folks at GCD, I think that we have ways. We just need to advertise those. And so
All
I will
right.
work on that. I'm going to get a list of those and we can get those out to you guys. I know sometimes when you say things in a podcast, people hear them, but if they don't have a pen handy and can't jot it down, so we'll have some other way of, I don't know if maybe we can get one of the folks at GCD to put them like on the show. I don't know if they can do superimposed titles or whatever. But we'll find that out. We will have a way to get that information across to you. So we're going to be sharing across a multitude of social media platforms, and that way, really, no matter if you're a young person on TikTok or an older person who's on Facebook or whatever, we'll have a way for you to get with us. So, Marshall, how are you this evening, and what's up in your world?
Oh, well, I'm recovering. I'm not sick anymore, but I'm still kind of messed up. So excuse me if I don't talk like I normally. Yeah, I'm pretty messed up. Are you laughing at me? I've
No,
always
no.
been messed up. But my throat is still not working appropriately. I tried to sing in church the other day. That was a mistake, which everyone recognized immediately.
Uh,
But anyway, I'm still having trouble talking, and I might start coughing. And I hope you all excuse me. And thanks for putting up with me. Um,
well,
Meanwhile,
I want to interject that, for
yeah,
those of you who don't know Marshall, he has an amazing baritone voice. I have heard him sing, and he really is a good singer.
well, I'm honored that you think so. Praise God if it's true. Anyway, so I know we've already talked considerably about the confirmation hearings that had already passed, but man, these just get more and more interesting as you go. It's just kind of fascinating watching Bernie Sanders watching Bernie Sanders yell about some baby's onesies at RFK Jr. was one of my favorite moments in politics in my entire life. I mean,
I mean,
that's
Bernie Sanders is bless his heart, he's such a clown anyway.
that poor sad little man. But and in watching each of the nominees, each of the candidates for confirmation, as they sit and watch these senators act a fool, just act a straight up fool. And then they kind of, they just kind of shake their heads and they try their best to answer what they think the question might be, because you
Uh-huh.
have to guess, you have to kind of try to figure it out. And so I was wondering about it, I'm wondering how I would deal with it, because you know how I am. I would probably make a mess of the whole process and just kind of look at them all and say, "What are you talking about?" But you stop. Do you mean to say this? And so I came home after running the kids around to lacrosse practice and all that other stuff. And I got home and sat down to have dinner. And I looked at Julie across the table and I said, I've been wondering all day what it would be like for me to go through a confirmation process. And her immediate response was not, "Well, I think you could do it," or, "That might be tough," or, you could probably work around about how you talk to people. Her immediate response was, not every position requires a confirmation.
Uh-huh. Yep.
The
Yep.
presumption being, I guess, that I need to just aim a little bit lower, because I'm not going to get through a confirmation hearing.
I never know.
Yeah.
But I would say you being infantry
Yeah.
and you being
Yeah.
as you are, maybe just a tad bit on the stubborn side.
A little bit.
And yeah, and you're very strong-willed. And when you get your mind set to something, that's it. So sometimes things require a sledgehammer and sometimes things require a scalpel. So
Well,
it's
I try to aim for jobs for which I'm suited. I mean, it's not like I go around trying to be a neurosurgeon.
right. No, that's not what I meant. That's a good pun though. But what I'm saying is you recognize your strengths and weaknesses, and that's good because so many people go through life and never recognize their weakness. Well, sometimes they don't recognize their strengths either, but a lot of people
Right.
think they're good at everything and they're not willing to say, you know what, that's not my forte. I'm going to let another person handle that, you know? And I
Well,
think,
actually, I learned that lesson the first time I tried to play basketball. And
yeah,
anyway,
but you did good at football. So there
oh
you go.
well, yeah, I tackled the goalpost. But anyway, we're not really here to talk about my joking around with my family, but
You got to
um,
inject some humor once in a while.
yeah, yeah. So I've been watching these confirmation hearings, and there's a pattern. Obviously, if you watch any of them, you can see the pattern. The pattern is just abject silliness, and it's what I've heard called. There's this concept of a humiliation ritual, and it comes from the communists, and the idea is, um, you have to make someone feel grateful for what they've earned, because as Barack Obama said, you didn't do that, right?
Mhm. You
You
didn't
built a
build that.
business, you didn't do that.
Mhm.
You get the idea, right?
Yep.
So it's this humiliation ritual. And the thing is, once I began to perceive that, I could see it all over our government. So if you want to be elected in the Republican Party in West Virginia, you have to go through this humiliation ritual, you know, and there are reasons for a humiliation ritual, and basically what it comes down to is it binds you all together, right, as an organization, and it's something you've all been through together. But on top of that, it's basically a leash. It's a
Yep.
leash. You have already submitted your integrity, your dignity, and your individuality to these people through this humiliation ritual. And at that point, there's actually like this, and I'm using psychic in the real sense, not psychic like, I'm going to move things with my brain, but psychic as in, the way your brain works,
Mhm.
psychic and spiritual submission to someone when you allow them to impose a humiliation ritual on you.
Mhm.
And so, of course, what's happening is you go in there and you're like, man, I really want this job. I really want to be the Secretary of Defense. I really want to be the, Secretary of the Treasury. I really want to do this because I really want to serve the people. I have these principles. I want to serve according to these principles, and I want someone who's going to do it right, and I'm going to try really hard to do it right. Please give me the chance to do this. And you
Right.
walk into this place, and there are all these people sitting there. There are 100 people, and they are all very convinced of their importance.
Yep.
And they are all very convinced that you are walking in and you're a beggar. You are begging them for the opportunity to enter the world of rarefied air and
Yep.
special spices and beauty and wonder where they live. And they have to make you humiliate yourself in front of everyone before you're allowed to enter. And where
Uh-huh.
this comes from originally, I said it came from the communists, but it goes beyond that. It was introduced into the modern world in the form that I'm thinking of by the Soviet communists in Russia, and then of course they built the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Mhm.
But that came into the Russian culture from the Khans. So basically, the Rus, the Russians,
Mhm.
are not Slavics. Okay, so the Slavic people live there, and then the Rus, which is Slavic for rowers, which means the Norsemen, came down their rivers, and they actually would capture them, and kill the men, capture the men and women, and sell them down the river. Down the river, that's a real term that
Mhm.
we use today, and that's where it comes from. They would sell them down to the river to the Arabic slave traders,
Mhm.
right? And that was what they would do. And then they would set up their own little colonies in the Slavic lands. By the way, the word Slav is where we get the word slave. So the
Mhm.
Slavic people being captured by the Rus, the Russians, the Rus, which were actually Norsemen, and then selling those Slavic people into slavery to the Muslims who were down the river. And that's where that concept comes from. Well, anyway, when those Rus established their kingdom, the Mongol Empire came along and conquered them, and then the Russian leader would have to travel to meet the Khan and would have to um, humiliate himself before the Khan. And the way that they would do this, there were a lot of things they had to do. They had to bring a lot of money and a lot of gifts, and they had to use all kinds of flowery statements about how great the Khan is and how low and debased I am before him. They'd have to present all these gifts and everything. And the Khan would look at these gifts and he would spit on them and say that they were garbage. And then the Rus leader, and this is all of the people who were conquered by the Mongols, by the Khans, they would have to do this, but he would get on all fours in front of the Khan, and the Khan would use him as a footstool, literally. Literally use him as a footstool. Curse him, kick him, spit at him, and throw things at him and insult him the entire time he's holding court. So everyone else is gathered around, all the Mongols, and they're making decisions about what to do with the lands they hold and all this kind of stuff. And meanwhile, this supposed king of the Rusians, this great leader, who is subject to another great leader, but he rules in that great leader's stead. He has to be on his hands and knees, getting spit on, kicked on, and sometimes even worse than spit on, and that's what it was all about, this humiliation ritual. But if he went through the humiliation ritual, he was then empowered to go back home to Moscow and impose humiliation rituals on every one of his subordinate leaders. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So these humiliation rituals are the way that they do this, the way that they bind their power together. Mm-hmm. And the only way you can have any power is to submit to their control. And at the point someone's controlling you, how much power do you have? You don't even control yourself. Yep. You get what I'm saying? And yet that's the way it works in American politics today. And that's where it came from. It came from the Mongols through the Rus, the Russians, and came into Eastern Europe, and then it made its way into our great universities and our great institutions. Mm-hmm. And if you know anything about Italian communists, what was his name? I'll think of his name in a minute. But anyway, they had the great Italian philosopher, a communist philosopher, talked about the march through the institutions. You're looking it up for me. You're going to say Gramsci. That's who it is, Gramsci. Gramsci, I believe. But Gramsci talked about the march through the institutions, where you get your people into each of the institutions and you keep moving them up the line. And each one of your people, no matter how much they hate each other, no matter how much each one of them wants to consume the other one, to submit the other one to himself, to force the other one into a humiliation ritual, what they all agree to do is to help each other impose humiliation on everybody else. Does any of that sound like what's been happening in the United States for the past 70, 80 years?
Vaguely familiar.
I see it. What's that?
That sounds vaguely familiar.
So these confirmation hearings are really only supposed to be an opportunity for the president to present the people that he wants in these positions, and the Senate gets to advise and consent. Doesn't say advise and not consent. Now, they can withhold their consent, but the general presumption is that they're going to take a look at the people and they're going to say to the president, hey, we're concerned about this guy's problem with this. Are you aware of this? And then they confirm the president's guy, and then the president takes responsibility for that guy's actions with full knowledge of who he really is. It's not really supposed to be a humiliation ritual. It's supposed to be an actual investigation of who the guy is, what is specifically his professional qualifications, and as long as he doesn't have any outstanding, major character flaws, I'm not going to go into what those might be because you can imagine. But anyway, as long as he doesn't have any major character flaws and he is competent and has the background to do the job, their job is to say, look, we found these issues we're concerned about, but they're on you now because he's your guy and you chose him. And then give him a thumbs up. That's the way this is supposed to work. But instead, they've turned it into a humiliation ritual. And that's because that's who this particular crop of senators are. And it goes back to, first of all, it goes back to the early 20th century when the first American communists, they called themselves progressives, when the first American communists were engaged in the United States. And of course, once again, that's Wilson and his ilk, not related to me at all, as far as I can tell, except maybe going way back in the old country, way back, talking more than 10 generations, because I've gone more than 10 generations back. But in addition to that, after World War II, as we brought Eastern Europeans into the United States, Operation Paperclip, I'm sure you heard of that. Yep. But there's a great book by Michael Walsh. It's called The Devil's. It's not The Devil's Playhouse. Devil's Pleasure Palace or something like that. But anyway, he talks about how they brought all these guys from Eastern Europe who were nihilist communists, and then they brought them into American universities and put them in positions of great influence. And I'm talking, the Ivy League institutions, not, not Baton Rouge Community and Technical College or, George Smith University. It was, the major Ivy League universities, put them in there in positions of power and influence. And then they changed everything about the way our intelligentsia, I'm not going to use the word elites because I don't consider them elite, but our intelligentsia saw everything. And of course, their input formed the culture, and politics is downstream from culture, as we all know. Yep. So they reshaped the culture. Now, earlier, Sam and I were talking about how, you don't just jump onto the battlefield and just start winning. What you do is you have to shape the battlefield. And we were talking about how the progressives, it looks like all of a sudden they just took over. Well, that's not what happened. For over a century, they were shaping the battlefield, putting this guy in position, putting that guy in position. They were marching through the institutions. And then when the time was right, they said, we got it. We're in charge now.
I would dare say that they've been shaping the battlefield almost since the beginning of our country.
I would agree with you, except that I'm specifically talking about progressives and communists, which in my mind are pretty much synonymous.
Right. The Devil's Pleasure Palace.
Devil's Pleasure Palace. Thank you. By Michael Walsh. The man's a genius.
And he also wrote a book called Rules for Radical Conservatives, as well as The People versus the Democratic Party.
I have Rules for Radical Conservatives. I've not seen the one about the Democrat Party. He also wrote another one that's basically about why men fight when there's no hope that they'll win. And it uses a lot of historical references. It's on this bookshelf back here somewhere. And as I said, Michael Walsh is a bloody genius, because he's not just a historian. He's not just an academic. He's also a culture critic. And by that, I mean, literally, he has studied music. He studied art. He's a playwright. He's a
music critic.
Yes, he's literally a critic of these things. So he is a culture critic. And so he brings that brings those tools to the writing as well, to his analysis of our culture. And I wish I could show it to you. It's here somewhere, but I'm not going to waste any more time looking for it. It's back there.
Well, just an interesting blurb about him. He won numerous awards as a music critic, and he was actually the music critic for Time magazine in the spring of '81. Yes. And then he was also a foreign correspondent for the magazine from '89 to '96, based in Munich, Germany, which city he covered firsthand the fall of the Berlin Wall in '89 and the collapse of Soviet communism in '91.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And by the way, when he and I were talking about that, he told me that he was actually on the eastern side of the wall when it fell. So that's the guy we're talking about here. Anyway, so he wrote Devil's Pleasure Palace, and it describes how they brought in East European communists, intellectuals, but East European intellectuals, put them into our universities, and it changed our culture radically. And it took a few years. But frankly, it got to the point where, the 60s, all that stuff that goes on in the 60s was a result of the nihilism that these guys taught and infused into the American mind. Absolutely horrific. And the thing is, you think that ideas don't matter. You think that only actions matter, but actions are born of ideas. As a man believes in his heart, so is he. That's what he is, what he believes. I'm not saying that if you believe you're a toadstool, you can be a toadstool. What I'm saying is that if you believe that nothing matters, you will behave as if you believe nothing matters. And that would be horrific. So that's where these guys come from.
So I did not know until I started reading here a second ago, but I knew that Michael Walsh sounded familiar. And then Bing, it's right in front of me. He in January of 2010, he worked with Andrew Breitbart to launch bigjournalism.com.
Yep. Yep. That's the guy.
Strange that Andrew died. I find that interesting.
Well, it's strange how he died. Yeah. It's not
Well,
strange
yeah,
that he died.
yeah. Well, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah. So, anyway, the point is it's all a humiliation ritual.
Yep.
And I have watched over the years as people have gone through these confirmation hearings / humiliation rituals, and they have always kowtowed, always. But this new crop of nominees aren't doing it. So the whole point of the story I told at the beginning is that, it looks like I might actually have a chance. Were I in front of these people because they're getting confirmed without humiliating themselves. They're getting confirmed without selling out their principles. They're getting confirmed without saying, yes, well, you're so wise and good. And I'll have to look into that because, that's a really good question, whether or not I like onesies that say, unvaxxed is good, baby clothes, because that's the most important thing in the world right now, Senator Sanders. These guys are not doing it. And there's only one way that people behave that way. And that is when they have cover from the boss. Now, that's one of the things I always told my guys, as an Army commander. I'd say, look, you do your job. You do your job. I will cover you. I will provide you the resources you need, and I will take all the stuff that's coming from above. Yeah, the crap rolls downhill, but it rolls right to me and it stops. We're done there. You do your job. And you know what? If we end up in front of a Senate committee discussing, because this was back when people were getting thrown in jail for being soldiers. I don't know if you remember that. People would come home from Iraq and in chains because they did what they were supposed to be doing. And bad things happen when soldiers do what they're supposed to be doing, but that's what they're supposed to do. And I told them, I said flat out, I said, look, you don't come home in a body bag. Don't let it happen. I will go and testify to the Senate and spend the rest of my life in Leavenworth, but you are not coming home in a body bag.
Right.
And I believe that's what's happened here, that, the chief executive has gone to his executive appointees, the president, Mr. Trump, has gone to these people and he said, look, I want you to do this job, but to do this job, you've got to get through this humiliation ritual, this firestorm, this more like crap storm, this exploding cess bucket. You've got to get through this. Right. But I tell you what, I'm there with you. Okay.
Yep.
You go in there, you tell the truth, you stand up for what you believe in, and I'm right there with you. And I think that's what makes that sort of ubiquitous response. Ubiquitous, I mean, among his nominees. They are all responding that way. It's pretty amazing.
It is. It is. And I would say, how can you really truly be a leader or a good leader if you are not willing to take responsibility for, I'm asking you to do a job. You do what I'm asking you to do. I'm not going to throw you under the bus. I'm going to take the heat for whatever the consequences are. I'm going to say, no, it's not Marshall's fault. He did what I asked him to do.
Right. And in addition to that, how can you be the person who actually works for that guy if you won't show the same sort of courage and integrity and focus on mission? More importantly, though, I think, if you'll forgive me, I think more importantly than both of those, though, is the fact that all of those people work for us.
Absolutely.
And if they will not stand up to a bunch of poo-flinging from a bunch of lunatics in the Senate, then how can we expect them to stand up when it's really hard? When it's not just a bunch of people asking them stupid questions about baby clothes on TV and making everything they do seem small and tawdry. If they can't stand up to that, when we're in a real world situation and stuff is exploding and people are dying and horror is surrounding us, how can we expect them to actually do their job, which is to secure our natural rights?
Right.
They're not going to stand up for what they believe through a humiliation ritual. How in the world are they going to stand up for what we need from them when real world problems are all around them and there is suffering and it's their fault?
Yep.
They have
That's
to
a
take
hundred.
responsibility for fixing. I'm sorry, Todd, I'm talking over you
No,
again.
no, that's okay. That's 100% correct. You're 100% correct on that. If they're not willing to stand on their own principles, they're not going to be willing to stand up for anyone else's rights.
Right, right. And so what I'm seeing happening is he's choosing these people because he thinks, and I agree with him. That's not relevant. What I think is not relevant, but he chooses these people because he thinks they're going to do the job that he wants done. And then he sends them in there and he says, look, guys, stand up under fire. Tell them the truth. Tell them what you told me in our meeting when I chose you as my candidate. And I'm right there with you. We're there. We're there together. And
Yeah.
then they,
No, I was just going to say, and like or dislike Mr. Trump it's not relevant to the fact that he is. I don't think in my lifetime have I ever seen one person come under such attack as he has, since his first run for president. I mean, he and his family have been under constant scrutiny and attack since day one.
yeah, and not just him, but the people around him is and not just his family. You mentioned his family, but I believe if I read correctly that yesterday or the day before there was actually an attempt to kill the new Secretary of the Treasury.
Yeah.
Guy hasn't even had a
Somebody,
chance to do anything yet.
somebody with Molotov cocktails.
Yeah, Molotov cocktail.
Yep.
The problem with a Molotov cocktail is it's not a very exacting weapon, and if you
No.
really want to kill a guy, that's not the way you do it. Not that I don't want to discuss that any further. But anyway, so yeah, if you stand up for what Trump wants, it's not Trump believes in. It's not just that you'll be made fun of about your preference for baby clothes. Somebody might try to kill you. They
Right.
tried to kill him.
And speaking of that, I saw something else I saw crazy. Did you see where the lady who is the Phyllis Fong, the
Yes.
Inspector General for the Department of Agriculture, refused to be terminated? They had to escort her out of her office.
He just decided that the chief of the executive branch didn't have the authority to fire an employee of the executive branch. I mean, that's just madness.
Yep.
Just utter madness. And she, once again, these people don't understand. They don't understand. They honestly believe that the system that Woodrow Wilson and his cohort set up, where we have a bunch of quote experts running the country and making all the decisions, that they actually have the authority to tell the elected people that we have chosen and that we have hired to actually impose our will on the government. She believes that she can tell them to go take a long walk off a short pier. Yep. The chief of the executive branch, yep, who carries with him the will of the people and the power of the Constitution, walks up to her and says, "Hey, look, thanks for your time. Go find something else to do." And she's like, "Nope, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to hold my breath." He's like, "Okay, you hold your breath. Hey guys, get her out of here." It's just madness. But the thing is, these people are so inundated in this idea that they are actually in charge. They really, honest to God, believe it.
Yep.
I mean, they wouldn't behave this way otherwise.
And I'm not saying that this is true in all cases, but most of those folks that I've spoken with over my life feel like, they feel like they're intellectually superior. They know what's best for you. Just Marshall, just sit down and be quiet. I'll take care of it for you. It's such an anti-state type setting.
Yeah, absolutely. They are absolutely convinced that they're smarter, that they're more moral, that they are more creative, that they're more capable, and that they just generally have a better understanding of the world than you possibly could.
Yep.
As we've discussed, I think once or twice, and I hope you'll forgive me for bringing it up again. I was a civil military operational planner with some good success. I actually had some success in that role, and I walk into the House of Delegates in West Virginia on my first day. The speaker's talking about which committees he wants to assign people to. He says, "Oh, and by the way, we have a brand new committee on emergency operations. It's a subcommittee on emergency operations, and I need to assign people to that. So if you're interested, let me know." I'm an emergency operations planner. I did civil military operations. I wrote the all hazards operations plan with my little team of planners. I was the middle guy, not the junior guy, not the senior guy, the middle guy on this team. And we rewrote the entire plan for the state of Louisiana after Katrina and Rita, after the big hurricanes and after the big failures. We wrote a whole new plan, a plan, not like a plan, but a plan. And it became the model for various other states to write their plans. And I walked in and I said, "Hi, I'd like to help. Can I be on this committee, please?" And his response was, "You're new here. You don't know anything. Go sit down and be quiet." And that is absolutely the mindset that these people have. Well, you're not in my club, are you? We're in the same ring. I am. You didn't go to the same college I did. No, gosh, no. You went to some college. Wow, in some weird little city in the deep South. That's very strange. And
Never even heard of it.
Yeah, I was in some office working for an admiral when I was in the Navy, and all you were was an infantryman running around the ground with a bunch of dirty grunts. So, and the thing is, they actually have these beliefs. These are deeply held beliefs that they have, that they are a different sort of creature, that they're in a different class, that they are superior to other human beings. As a matter of fact, other human beings are actually less human than they are. And I'm dead serious. This is really how they see things, which is why they can say, "You know what, we're just going to send a bunch of these guys off to die somewhere, and let's hope it works out okay. But meanwhile, at least my kid's not going." But
Yep.
These are the people imposing the humiliation rituals on us from all sides at all times, and it's simply on display with these confirmation hearings. What you looking at?
I was just looking at the Wikipedia entry on Phyllis Fong. I was just curious about her.
She's
where
a
she was
fascinating
born.
human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that she was on the Pandemic Accountability Council or something like that. I'm like,
I would love to see those people held accountable. Wouldn't that
Oh
be
yeah.
great?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I was in DC on January 20th. I was invited to a shindig at Arlington that was canceled, supposedly because it was too cold to be outside. But strangely enough, the principals were all outside for it. I rather think that it was, that most of the outdoor activities were canceled more for security concerns than for weather. But I was outside for a couple of days and met some really fascinating people. But today I was talking with another fascinating gentleman who had a very interesting perspective on the work that Mr. Trump has managed to accomplish in the past, 9 days. And by the way, if I may, I'd like to back up a little bit. I was not an energetic, enthusiastic Trumper in 2016. I was not. I'm not going to lie to you. I took a look at the guy and I thought, well, he thinks he's going to be the CEO of the government and just tell people what to do, and they're just going to do it. And that's not the way this works, right? And then he got elected, and I heard a lot of the things he said. I voted for him because, he was the best of the available options. And I was hoping that at least a third of what he said would come to pass. Hoping, I really was. And I watched and I watched and I watched, and he constantly got undercut by the deep state, by the professional government, like I was talking about, that Woodrow Wilson set up. And all I could think was, man, if we could just get somebody who actually knows how to fight these people and has the same principles that guy has, we might be able to turn this thing around and actually restore the republic.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we went through 4 years of Biden, and all I can think is, I've got 9 kids. They're growing up under this stuff. They think this is normal. And, are we ever going to turn it around? What are we going to have to do to make this different? And then Trump ran, of course, for his third term, because I do believe that he won in 2020. But I also believed that in 2024 he would win, and that they would pull the same shenanigan, and we'd end up with Kamala Harris. And I was deeply, deeply surprised and grateful to see that that didn't happen. But like I say, I had appreciated everything Mr. Trump said in 2016, was happy to vote for him. I didn't believe any of it was going to happen because I've been inside government. I've seen how things work. I know how they're supposed to work, and they don't work anything like they're supposed to. And I just knew it wasn't going to happen. And I was grateful that he was trying, though. And then, of course, I believe that he won in 2020, and he got robbed of his win. And then we spent 4 years with Biden, and the entire time, talk about going from red pill to black pill. I was getting tired, man. I was getting really tired and frustrated. And of course, as you know, I ran for governor in 24 with the deepest desire that when the rest of the country fell here in West Virginia, we could retain a vestige of the republic. That was my intent. I was going to be governor in West Virginia because Kamala Harris was going to be president in the United States, because they were going to steal it from Mr. Trump again. And then I was going to do my best to ensure that we could retain a memory of the republic here in West Virginia. And then Mr. Trump won, and it became official that he won. And I started, the lights started coming back on, and I thought, well, here you go. Let's take a look at this. And then I was invited to go to DC for the swearing in for the inauguration, and I was very happy to do that. And of course, the whole time it was a lot like 2016, but a lot deeper, a lot more ragged, if that makes any sense to you. Mm-hmm. I really hope what this guy is saying is going to happen, but I'm convinced that it's not. I believe they stole an election from him. How is he going to get anything done? And then I walked in, and I sat there and I waited and waited. And finally he shows up and he gives us this great talk. I thought, well, that's great. Man says a lot of good words. That's fantastic. And I think he has good intent. And then he pulled out 200 executive orders. 200 executive orders right in front of us. Said, I'm going to sign these. And I thought, oh man, I hate executive orders.
Uh-huh.
I do. I detest them. Yep. And then he explained what each one of them was. And the first, I believe, 87 of them were simply overturning Biden's executive orders.
Right.
I was like, okay, that's righteous. That's righteous. That's outstanding. And then he discussed the other executive orders, and each one of them was an order to an executive department or office to execute the freaking laws that exist.
Yep.
And I said, that's what an executive order is supposed to be. Yep. But in a lot of them, all I could think was, well, why is that necessary? Well, it's necessary because for the past 70, 80 years, that department or office has existed, that code or law has existed, and they have been ignoring it. And now he's saying, look, this is the law, do it. I was dumbfounded. I thought, this is how you do it. Now, of course, if he continues to govern by executive order, we might have a problem, but I don't think that's the intent. I don't think it's the intent
either. But like you said earlier, for him to get people that are willing to do whatever it takes to put the people first and protecting our individual natural rights. And that includes the lawmakers in Congress, and they've been very inept for quite some time. I mean,
jeez.
We have so many laws on the books. I mean, you're talking about Dodge, that the group that we have now for government efficiency. They could spend who knows how long just going through the current laws on the books and saying, you know what, this is not even necessary. This is not essential, whatever. And then maybe, vote on it or whatever. But man, I mean, we've got laws upon laws upon laws.
Yeah. Well, his executive order to shut down government grants. All right. First of all, on the face of it, I look at that and I say, well, that's pretty rough. That's that's like throwing an atom bomb into a paper target.
Right.
Excuse me, but I was wrong.
Yeah.
As I started looking at some of these grants, the only way to determine which ones of them need to go away and the right process for doing them, and then also execute that is by shutting them down completely, because the money that's been paid out through these government grants is going to the people who are fighting him in the government, who who are preventing us from stopping human trafficking. It's
Yeah.
going to the people who are bringing illegal aliens into our country. Our tax
Absolutely.
money is being granted via government grants to these organizations that are doing this. And the only way to ever figure out what's going on, and even if you figure out what's going on, you can't do anything about it unless you just cut them all off
Got to cut it
now.
off. Yep.
Beautiful. Absolutely
Yep.
elegant what he's done here.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the guys that I follow who tracks aircrafts, and I think we talked about that before, talked about the aircraft companies who fly contracted aircraft and were going to South and Central America and picking up plane loads of people and bypassing customs and everything and flying these people right into our country, in the internal part of our country. Yeah,
into the heartland.
That's right. And he said that's still going on right now. As of yesterday, I think it was, but he said that he sees a diminished number of flights. So hopefully that does come to a stop. But that just goes to prove what you're saying is true. And that is the fact that there are people who are undermining his authority, undermining his plan, still working from the inside. And frankly, if it's like immigration and they're flying people in here, I mean, that would be borderline of being a treasonous activity. Because
I think it's worthy of attempting to litigate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the other thing. So Trump he's cutting off the head of the snake. He's stopping the funding. But I think that these people who have been in there working behind the scenes to undermine him, or really, I would say, undermine our country and the people's will, they have to be held accountable, Marshall.
They do. And I think that it starts with the actions he's taking now. All right. So first of all, did you hear about him sending out an email to the entire executive branch that says, hey, I invite you to quit, type resign in and send it back, and we'll give you 8 months severance pay. Who the heck gets 8 months severance pay for resigning from a job?
Yeah.
It's all funded by the taxpayer, which really makes me angry. But the option is to keep them on the payroll and then try to go through the process of removing them and the court costs and the union and all that. First of all, government personnel should not be unionized. Why is that? And they certainly should never strike. Certainly should never strike.
Exactly. And I would venture to say that no employment that is funded by taxpayer dollars should ever be unionized. I feel the same way with the teachers union.
Right. So here's the thing. Here's why that's a problem. The government exists for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to secure our natural rights, which means that every single function of the government should be some form or a task which somehow secures our natural rights. It has to be nested. In other words, here's the strategic plan. You got these goals that need to be met. You got these actions that need to take place, and they all make it possible for the government to secure our natural rights. So anything that is actually securing our natural rights,
or basically anything that is enumerated in the Constitution for the government,
anything that secures our natural rights, as the government was formed to do, must be done. Otherwise, you are literally denying people the free exercise of their natural rights. So if you work for the government and your job is actually pursuant to the government's mission, which is to secure the natural rights of each citizen, and you refuse to do your job, you are actually denying those citizens you serve the free exercise of their natural rights. That's why you shouldn't be able to strike. Now, should you be able to negotiate for better pay? Absolutely. Should you be able to leave your job at any moment and go get another job because you want more money? Absolutely. Should government jobs pay and also be positions of respect? No. Benjamin Franklin talked about that. He said you can either pay well and get good professionals who know what they're doing, or you can make it a job of respect because they are working hard for the people. But if you add the respect to the pay, then what you'll end up drawing all the wrong people. People who want money and position rather than want to serve, or people who simply want to do a good job and get paid for it.
Yep.
Benjamin Franklin said that, and he was
dead right. He's a pretty bright guy.
Yeah.
So that email you're talking about that went out to the federal employees went out to more than 2 million federal employees, 2 million. And as of November of last year, the entire federal government had around 3 million or a little more than 3 million people. So that's 1.9% of the nation's entire civilian workforce.
Yeah. So here's the battlefield they're looking at. So he wants to cut the size of government. If he can get them to leave,
Yep.
then they can simply not hire more people and
That's
then
right.
work on the legislation, which will actually change the structure of the government, right? Some of that will be court cases where they'll claim this is unconstitutional. Some of that will be simply passing legislation that does away with a particular, I say simply, it's not going to be simple at all, does away with a certain department or function of the government. So he's got two options. He can either convince a bunch of people to just go ahead and drop out now and then keep the savings from that and use it to do what's necessary to diminish the actual structure of the government. Or he can leave all those people in position and attempt to work on diminishing the structure of the government while fighting against them to both remove them from office and also to make the changes in the government that diminish its size. So it's brilliant. It's absolutely stunning. And yeah,
Yep.
I'm angry about the 8 months severance pay, but frankly, if that's the kind of bribe they need to quit stealing my natural rights, my freedoms, I guess that's what it's going to take. Because frankly, ultimately, it'll end up costing me a lot more to not get them out of the way.
Well, and what I was going to say is if you take into account salaries and benefits for those people who would quit, it wouldn't take very long before your return on investment would be positive. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of that, do you know what the greatest expense for the entire U.S. Army is? Got all these amazing weapon systems and M1A1 heavies and Bradleys and Strikers and all this incredible stuff. You know what's the most expensive line item on the U.S. Army budget?
I would say the VA.
Personnel pay and benefits. No, the VA
Oh,
is a separate department.
okay.
Personnel pay and benefits for the Army is the
Yep.
highest line item in their budget.
Well, and I heard a man say the other day, we won World War II with 7 4-star generals.
Right, right. And now
And
we've
now
got
we
what,
have like
30 of them?
74 or something
Oh,
like that.
wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's just madness. I was on a mission in Korea shortly before I put in my retirement paperwork. I was the chief of operations for this unit that was helping to ensure that we were all on the same sheet of music if Kim Jong-un came across the border. And my guys were all staff experts in certain areas. So air defense, planning, artillery planning, infantry planning, logistics planning, all that kind of stuff. These guys were real experts in what they were doing. And I was the operations guy, and my job was to kind of pull it all together, chief of operations. And so we're over there, and there are just generals everywhere, which, we're in an army headquarters, meaning we're in the third Republic of Korea Army headquarters, and of course, the U.S. 8th Army. And then you've got all the reserve and everything. So there should be a handful of generals around, but man, they were just, you couldn't swing a stick without hitting a general.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, what do all these guys do? And I'm talking about American generals. There were also Korean generals and then some allied generals. And it was amazing. It was really unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is, you and I have talked about that explicitly before, and you could fill in the details, but I understand that as a once you reach the staff officer level and move on up from there, your career starts becoming more political, less apolitical, and certainly at the general level, I'm sure it's much politics.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. If I can, just a minor correction here.
Not
Uh, Army
not st-
officers, huh?
not staff officer. I used the wrong word there.
Yeah,
Correct.
Army officers switch back and forth between what we call green tab leadership, which means you're commanding troops, you're leading troops, like a platoon leader, a company commander, a battalion commander.
Right.
And so we switch back and forth between command positions and staff positions throughout our careers. So it's not really a level; it's just an assignment. The
Okay.
levels are the levels are company grade, field grade, and then flag officer.
Field
So
grade.
yeah,
That's what I was
yeah,
looking for.
once you start moving into lieutenant colonel, which is higher field grade, so you got major, lieutenant colonel, and then colonel is field grade.
Hmm.
So once you start to become a senior lieutenant colonel, it starts to become just politics.
Right.
It's hard, and then once you're in 06, your knowledge, your understanding, your capability of leading troops is very important. But at the same time, there's so much politics, you can barely focus on doing your real job. And then once you're a general, you just live in that rarefied atmosphere. It's amazing. So, and I've seen a few generals do it and maintain their feet on the ground, their focus on the mission, and their concern for the troops. But those guys were different.
So
They were
that's
special.
what, and that was my point. Sorry for using the wrong terminology there, but
All right.
thanks for getting me straight. Uh, but yeah, you were saying when you were in Korea, you couldn't swing a stick without hitting a general, and what were they doing? And that's my question. So, if generals are typically political, what were they doing? Why do we need that many people? You know, I always heard the phrase my grandma used: "Too many chiefs and not enough Indians."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's basically where the U.S. military is right now.
Yep.
And it has become a political organization. Now, I absolutely agree with, come on, Marshall, the Prussian military philosopher. He said that war is politics by other means. Um, and I absolutely agree with that. As a matter of fact, I would go beyond that, but that doesn't mean that it's a political means of policy. It is a combat means of policy. It is it's violence.
We're
The
talking
whole
about
point is, what's
von
that?
Clausewitz.
Yeah, Karl von Clausewitz. Thanks.
You're
Can't
welcome.
believe he's the guy. I can't remember. Couldn't pull up his name real quick. But anyway, von Clausewitz. He said that war is policy by other means, which is true. But really, what it means is that at the point that policy has failed, that our attempts to convince other people of our policies, well, then we have to kill them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what that means. We have to destroy their ability to resist. See,
Yeah.
war is not really death and destruction. War is the imposition of will, right?
Just like
By any
the
means
Borg.
necessary. By any means necessary, using whatever power is available. It just kind of works out that it usually involves killing a bunch of people and destroying a bunch of stuff.
Like the Borg, right? Resistance is futile.
Well, we're at war with China and have been for decades, but we can't get our government to recognize that. Now, the fact that we're not literally shooting each other right now, that there aren't American troops and Chinese troops lined up shooting each other, does not mean we're not at war. It just means it hasn't devolved to that point yet.
Well, I would, and I could be wrong about this. This is just my opinion, but I listened to a story about Richard Nixon going to China, and I think he was the first U.S. president to step foot in China, maybe if not ever. Been a long time
Since
and,
Chiang Kai-shek left the mainland.
right. And this was about the U.S. ping pong team. And it was a really interesting story about a guy who obviously didn't speak Chinese. He missed the U.S. bus and was stuck there. And he got on the Chinese bus, and they really couldn't speak each other's language, but they could understand ping pong. And, they kind of joked around. And so then Nixon was like, oh, hey, we should send the U.S. ping pong team to China. And then he built relationships there and then started, then you have the wealthy billionaires or whatever, millionaires, whatever that start.
Then you have Forrest Gump over there.
Yeah, Forrest Gump. Yeah, absolutely. But no, the point is, you said we've been at war with China, but we also have people who are so much in bed with China that I mean, they're getting their pockets lined by the
Chinese
Chinese.
methodology of war involves infiltrating your enemy's leadership.
Yep.
So who's more dangerous? The bad guy outside the wire pointing a rifle at you and wearing his country's uniform, or the bad guy inside your command post?
Right. The enemy versus the enemy you don't know.
No. It's worse than that. It's not the enemy you don't know. It's the one who's in your command post.
Right.
Who actually, is there. He's accepted.
Oh, yeah.
He's giving guidance. He's in charge.
Uh-huh. He's on your team because he's wearing the right uniform.
He's on your team.
Yep.
He's way more dangerous than the guy outside the wire pointing a rifle at you.
Yep.
All right, dude. I think we're getting close to running out of time, but I really enjoyed talking with you. I'm sorry about my voice. I'll try to be better a week from now.
I mean, you can't really apologize for something that you have no control over.
So on the 1st of February, the Constitution Party, which has newly earned ballot access in the state of West Virginia, we're going to have a meeting on the 1st of February, this coming Saturday, in Parkersburg, West Virginia, at the Rock Church at 2 p.m. And we're going to discuss how to go about winning some elections going forward. So we're going to start selecting candidates. We're going to start recruiting people. We're going to start building out our county executive committees and our state executive committee. And we are going to really start building some operational capabilities to win some elections throughout the state of West Virginia. So if you're in West Virginia and you want to come hang out with us, 2:00, Rock Church, Parkersburg, West Virginia, this Saturday, the 1st of February. And Todd, thanks for putting up with me. Sam and GCD Network, really appreciate y'all more than I can tell you. I'm going to go finish my dinner.
Okay, thanks a bunch for hanging out with me too. GCD Networks, as always, you're awesome. And for those of our listeners who feel inclined to do so, we ask that you please continue to pray for Paul. And your prayers are much appreciated. And thank you for all your love and support. Like I said, we'll have some information soon on how you can leave us comments or make fun of us or whatever you'd like to do.
All right, thanks. Y'all take care.